Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at heat acclimatization and what are some of the practical issues we can do in dealing with warmer environments. And so we previously talked about the effects of warm ambient temperatures, increasing core body temperature, and its effects on performance. And so what I'm going to look at now is trying to answer the question, so can we get better at this? Can we acclimatize, right? Can we improve our response to this? Well, let's start off with the negative and being, we've already seen before that exercise in warm environments is going to be impaired. And there's numerous reasons why related to effects on skeletal muscle, resulting skeletal muscle fatigue, that's going to affect cognition, various roles of the central nervous system. We also see cardiovascular effects as far as reductions in stroke volume and blood volume, which is obviously going to affect cardiac output. With these, we're also then going to see increases in lactic acid formation as well as other acids produced during exercise through radical production. So a lot of these systems we've talked about previously, and so obviously we're going to see impairments in a lot of aspects of performance. Now, the question we're going to try to answer here is, so can we improve any of these? And the answer is, to a degree, we can. We do know that individuals who chronically experience and exercise in warm and humid environments do see some changes. And these changes are a little more subtle. One of the big ones we see is an alteration in plasma volume. Now, this may seem unrelated to performance, but if we can have higher plasma volumes, we then have more water available for sweat production. We also then have less of an effect on hormone levels in plasma. This is going to keep blood volume and stroke volume up, at least for a longer duration of time. That will affect cardiac output. And so this is not an unimportant factor. By and large, we see larger sweat rates in these individuals, again, to likely deal with these warmer and humid environments. We even see, and there's a lot of research now into concentration of sweat. There's very good evidence that we see decreases, particularly in sodium chloride, of sweat concentration. And there's a lot of research into why this is, and there's some people who are what we call salty sweaters. They sweat different concentrations of sodium chloride than others. And so we definitely see some of this acclimatization. It occurs fairly quickly, and we also lose it fairly quickly. And so, but there is a benefit here. And so if we are exercising chronically in these warm, humid environments, and we then perform or race or have a game or something against individuals who are not used to these environments, there's definitely an advantage to that. I would say with heat acclimatization, probably the biggest things we're looking at are alterations in plasma volume and alterations in sweat rate. Those two are really going to have a major impact on performance. Now, when we say impact on performance, this doesn't mean that performance returns back to normal levels. It doesn't. We are never going to see the highest levels of particularly aerobic performance in warm and humid conditions. It just doesn't happen. And there's too much of an impairment. And not surprisingly, we're always going to see colder environments where aerobic activities, middle distance running, long distance running, sports that have a lot of an aerobic component, always going to be a higher level of performance in colder and with that drier environments. So we do acclimatize. There's definitely a benefit to that, but that doesn't change or answer the second question of, so how do we deal with exercise and heat? Not how do we acclimatize it, but we're in the warm and humid conditions. Are there things we can do prior to the activity to limit its effects on performance? Well, not surprisingly, a lot of these guidelines are related to what we've talked about before in regards to radiation, conduction, convection, and evaporation. If we can create environments that allow one or more of these factors to improve or to allow it to occur more readily, then that may be potentially beneficial. So, not surprisingly, exercising during the coolest part of the day, particularly in shade, particularly at night, that is going to limit radiational heat loss. Having maximal surface area of the skin for evaporation. Obviously, it makes sense. Allows evaporative. Also allows improvement in convection as well. Obviously, taking cool breaks, rehydrating, being shade, cool area. Can we circulate air? Is that possible? Now, obviously, sometimes in activity we don't have this the benefit of that, but if we are exercising on our own, sometimes we do. For those of you who exercise here in Florida, particularly where our university is, we know that if you go across the bridges to the beach, it's far more windier at the beach, far more windier in the intercoastal. And so sometimes just being in that windy environment, even if it's for a short part of a run, can induce a little more convective loss of heat. And obviously, we could also include here, it's very common for some runners to use ice cubes or some cooling device underneath a hat or something like that, or getting ice at various breaks to help with conductive loss of heat. And so, not surprising, all of these guidelines are somewhat related to these 4 factors that we've talked about previously, with the hope that in all of these, though evaporative loss is the key way we lose heat, the hope being we can use these other means and rely somewhat less on evaporative loss, because the big drawback of evaporation is dehydration. The more we rely on evaporation, the more water we will lose, and losing water greatly impairs performance, which we've talked about previously. Losses in blood volume, it's going to affect cardiovascular function, endocrine system function, and it doesn't take much. It only really takes a couple percent of loss of percent body weight to begin to see cognitive impairments, impairments on cardiac output, and these can happen fairly readily, even in a warm, humid environment, say 80, 85 degrees, maybe 60, 70% humidity. You could easily lose 1 to 2% of your body weight in 35, 40 minutes if there's a pretty decent sweat rate. And so maintaining normal hydration levels. And so general recommendations, and this is going to vary a bit with individuals, their body size, obviously sweat rates is a part of this, particularly more so during exercise. We want to continually monitor water intake, particularly before exercise, taking in about usually around 500 to 600 milliliters of fluid, and then consuming some amount while we're exercising, and the hope being that we are replacing as much water as we are losing. Now, truth is, we don't typically do that as humans. We actually often engage what's called voluntary dehydration, where even if given adequate sources, we still, because of lack of sense of thirst, because that is somewhat delayed, we don't typically drink enough to match the amount of water that we lose. Even if we're very intentional about it, even if we literally have someone force feeding us or force drinking us water, we still are not very good as humans at this. And so being diligent, particularly before exercise, can really, really be key in maintaining hydration levels to some degree. So those are some of the things we want to look at as far as exercising in warm temperatures and how we can improve performance, or what are some things we can do while we're engaging in these activities. In our next video, we're going to begin to talk about cold environments and what do cold environments bring, and what are some of the issues there that we will tackle in our next video.